So I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who judges another dude's body like it's some sort of contest. Like, yeah, I'm not blind. I notice when someone's got good genes or hits the gym, but rating someone? That's not really my thing. But then there was this one night, hanging out at a friend's apartment party in the city, when a guy the first barely knew asked me to do exactly that. And honestly, it caught me totally off guard. It started with a casual conversation that felt like any other weekend meetup. I was nursing a beer, leaning against the kitchen counter, when this guy, he's probably the last person I expected, walked up beside me. Tall, lean, with this kind of effortless confidence that made it hard not to notice him. His name was Jamie. We'd exchanged a couple sentences earlier that night. Nothing major, but there was something about the way he smiled that made me want to keep talking. Anyway, Jamie just looks over at me and, out of nowhere, says, "Hey, can you rate my body? Like, from 1 to 10? I blinked. For a second, I thought he was joking. Because who actually asks that? But no, he was dead serious. Like it was the most normal request in the world. The room was packed and loud, and people were streaming in and out of the kitchen. But for a moment, everything else faded. I was caught between amusement and confusion. I wanted to say something clever, maybe joke back, but before I could even open my mouth, he dropped his jacket on the floor and started pulling off his shirt. Now, if you'd told me earlier that night I'd be standing in a crowded apartment, staring at this guy's bare chest while he waited for me to rate him, I'd have laughed in your face. But there I was, watching as he peeled off his clothes like it was no big deal, like it was the most natural thing in the world to just reveal himself like that. Jamie's eyes didn't waver from mine. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, just this raw, unfiltered kind of daring that made me realize this wasn't some random, drunk bravado. There was something else behind it. A challenge, maybe, or a kind of trust? I couldn't tell yet. I glanced around, half expecting someone to call him out or for the music to suddenly stop, but the party just kept rolling like nothing had changed. And honestly, I wasn't even sure what I was supposed to do. Was I supposed to be impressed, honest, kind? I felt this weird mix of nerves and something else I couldn't put my finger on. So I took a breath, trying to steady myself because, okay, at this point, it was clear Jamie wasn't leaving it at just his shirt. He was already tugging at his jeans. And in that moment, all I could think was, what the hell have I gotten myself into? Jamie's fingers hooked into the waistband of his jeans, and before I could register what was happening, he slid them down just enough to reveal the top of his boxers. The room felt like it narrowed around us. The noise from the other partygoers dimmed into background static. I was standing there frozen, watching him, and my heart started to thump in this weird rhythm like I was caught in a loop between shock and curiosity. "Okay," he said, looking me dead in the eyes. "Now what's the rating?" The boldness of it was insane. I could have laughed, told him to get dressed, or just walked away. But instead, I found myself saying, "You're setting the bar pretty high, dude." He grinned, that easy, tooly smile again, like he knew exactly what he was doing. "Yeah? Then don't disappoint me." I was still trying to process the whole thing. Jamie wasn't this kind of guy I'd expect to do something attention-grabbing. He came across as chill, maybe a little reserved at first, but now, he looked like someone who thrived on pushing boundaries, and somehow that was kind of magnetic. Before I could respond, he slid his jeans the rest of the way down, stepping out of them and standing there in just his boxers. The room felt hotter, or maybe that was just me. I realized I wasn't just rating a body anymore. I was trying to figure out what the hell Jamie was doing and why I was suddenly so invested in the answer. I cleared my throat, trying to play it cool, but I felt my cheeks flush. "All right, I'm gonna be honest. You've got a nice build. Lean, athletic, but not over the top. You look like someone who actually takes care of himself." I tried to keep my tone casual, but I caught the flicker of something in his eyes, a mix of hope and challenge. "Okay, so, like a 7? I asked, trying to hedge my bet. Jamie chuckled softly and shook his head. "Nah, man, I'm aiming higher." "Try again." I laughed, partly because this whole thing was ridiculous. and partly because I was starting to enjoy it despite myself. Fine, 8. Solid 8, I said, feeling bolder. He nodded, stepping a little closer. Better, but you're still not done. Then, without warning, Jamie started undoing his boxers. I swear, the whole room felt like it tilted sideways for a second. I wasn't sure if I should be stunned, intrigued, or maybe a little weirded out, but there was something about the way he looked at me, calm, steady, like he trusted me not to make this weird, that made me just go with it. He stepped out of the boxers, standing there in nothing but confidence. I swallowed hard. The moment, which had started as some drunken dare or joke, now felt charged with this strange vulnerability. Jamie wasn't just asking me to rate his body. He was offering himself, completely unfiltered. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the subtle scars, the little imperfections, the way his skin caught the light. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I felt this sudden rush of something warm and unexpected. Okay, I said, my voice a little softer now. 10. You're a 10. Jamie's smile softened, and I realized I'd caught him off guard too. Seriously? He asked quietly. Yeah, not just because of how you look. It's the whole vibe. You've got guts, man. That's worth 1,000,000 points to me. He stepped forward, and the space between us felt electric. I'm glad you think so, he said, because I was kind of hoping you'd say something like that. The buzz of the party came back in waves as someone bumped into the counter, but for those few seconds, it felt like just the two of us existed in this bubble. Then he grabbed his shirt off the floor, pulled it back on, and gave me this look that said, "Your turn now." I laughed nervously. Nah, I'm good. But Jamie wasn't done. Come on, he said, voice low. You owe me a rating too. I froze, heart hammering again. I wasn't expecting that. The idea was terrifying and thrilling all at once. For a second, I just stared at him, then shrugged like, all right, why not? He grinned, eyes sparkling with mischief and something softer beneath it. I realized right then that this wasn't just a dumb party game anymore. It was something else, something real that neither of us was quite ready to name yet. And honestly, I kind of couldn't wait to find out what came next. I'd like to say I played it cool when Jamie said I owed him a rating, but honestly, my knees felt like jelly. There I was, standing in the middle of a noisy party, about to suddenly become the center of someone else's attention in a way I hadn't expected. I looked down at myself, half wondering what I even looked like from his perspective. I'm average, maybe a bit on the slim side, but nothing remarkable. Definitely not the kind of guy who steals the spotlight. Jamie caught my hesitation and laughed softly. Come on, man, don't be shy. It's just me. His tone was easy, no pressure, but there was this undeniable heat behind his eyes that made me feel like saying no wasn't an option. So I took a deep breath, ran a hand through my hair, and shrugged. All right, fine, I said, trying to sound casual even though my voice cracked a little. If you really want a rating, then I guess I'd say you're pretty damn good at what you do. He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by my vague answer. That's it? Pretty damn good? I laughed, feeling the tension break just enough to make things feel less scary. Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, I don't really do the whole rating bodies thing. But you're different. You've got this energy, man. Confidence. Not tooly, just solid. Jamie's grin softened and he nodded like he appreciated the honesty. That's fair. And I like the energy part. You've got some energy too, you know. I wasn't sure how to take that, but before I could ask for clarification, he leaned in a little closer. Look, I don't usually do stuff like this at parties. I'm not here to impress anyone or be the center of attention. But with you, it felt right. My heart gave a little squeeze. Right. That word echoed in my head as I realized I was feeling something unexpected. Jamie was different. Not just some random guy at a party, but someone who made me feel like, maybe, just maybe, there could be something more. The music shifted into a slower song, and suddenly the apartment wasn't so loud anymore. People moved around us like shadows, but Jamie and I stood there locked in this bubble of quiet. "So," he said, stepping back just enough to put his shirt back on properly, "what now?" I shrugged, feeling the warmth spread through me. "Now, maybe we get out of this crowded kitchen and somewhere quieter? Somewhere we can actually talk without shouting over the music?" He nodded, eyes sparkling. "I was hoping you'd say that." We slipped through the crowd, weaving past laughing groups and spilled drinks until we reached the stairwell. The dim lighting and faint echo of our footsteps made everything feel a little more intimate, like the party was happening miles away. Jamie stopped on the landing, looking at me with that same mixture of daring and vulnerability. "So," he said, "tell me about you. Not the guy who rates bodies at parties, but the guy I'm actually standing here with." I smiled, feeling more relaxed than I'd expected. "Well, I'm a software developer, mostly stuck behind a screen during the day. Not exactly exciting, but it pays the rent. I like hiking when I can, and I'm obsessed with old movies." "You?" he chuckled. "Sounds like a good balance for being a software guy." "Me? I work in graphic design, freelance mostly. Keeps me on my toes and lets me be creative. Hiking's great, but I'm more of a city guy. I like the energy, the people." We talked for what felt like hours, or maybe just minutes. I couldn't tell anymore. The conversation flowed easily, and every time I looked at Jamie, I caught myself smiling more than usual. At some point, he shifted closer again and brushed a stray lock of hair off my forehead. "You're different," he said softly. "Not in a bad way. It's refreshing." I felt my cheeks heat up. "That's a good thing, right?" "Definitely." The sound of the party faded further, replaced by the quiet hum of the building and the occasional distant car horn. It was like we'd carved out this little space just for us. Then Jamie's expression turned serious. "I know this is sudden. You probably think I'm some weirdo for just stripping in front of you." I laughed, shaking my head. "Yeah, a little. But maybe you're just honest in a way most people aren't." He smiled, that genuine, open kind that made me want to lean into him. "Honest, maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of hiding." There was something real in those words, a vulnerability that made me want to reach out and say something comforting. But instead, I said, "Well, you don't have to hide with me." He looked at me like I'd just handed him the most precious thing in the world. "Thanks," he whispered. At that moment, I realized this was way more than a random party game. It was the start of something I hadn't expected, but maybe had been waiting for, without knowing it. Jamie and I stood there, two guys caught off guard by a moment neither of us saw coming, but both desperately hoping would last. We stayed on that landing longer than either of us probably intended, the space between small but charged. Jamie's words echoed in my mind. Tired of hiding. I felt a sudden urge to understand him better, to know what lay beneath that bravado and the playful challenge he'd thrown at me earlier. "So," I said, breaking the silence, "what's your story? Like, really, what made you decide tonight was the night to do that?" He chuckled softly, running a hand through his hair, a little nervous now. "Honestly, I'm not great at talking about myself, but I guess I've spent a lot of time trying to not be seen in certain ways, hiding bits of who I am, especially when it comes to this side of me." He gestured vaguely at his body, then at me. I nodded. "I get that. It's weird, right? Feeling like you have to put on an act just to fit in." "Yeah," Jamie said, voice low. "But tonight, I saw something in you. Something real. And maybe it's naive, but I wanted to see if you'd see me too. Not just the surface, but everything else." It hit me harder than I expected. Jamie wasn't just being playful or reckless, he was risking something deeply personal. I took a step closer, my heart pounding. "I see you, Jamie. All of you." His eyes softened, and for a moment I thought he might say something more, but then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and frowned. "I should probably get back before someone notices I'm missing." "Yeah," I said, reluctantly pulling away. "Party waits for no one." Jamie smiled, but there was a hint of disappointment there. "Thanks for, not walking away," I grinned. "Would have been a jerk not to stick around after all that." He laughed, then leaned in and whispered, Maybe we could talk more sometime? Like, just us, not a party? I felt a warmth spread through my chest. I'd like that. We exchanged numbers, and as Jamie slipped back down the stairs, I found myself staring after him, wondering how a night that started with a random, awkward dare had turned into something that felt like the beginning of a real connection. Back in the apartment, the party had shifted gears. People were louder now, music heavier, and the room felt more crowded, but for me, everything was different. I wasn't just another guy at a party anymore. I was someone who'd just glimpsed something genuine. The next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about Jamie. His laugh, the way he looked at me, that moment when he dared to be vulnerable. So I messaged him first. Simple stuff at first. Hey, how's your week going? But it quickly turned into long conversations about everything from favorite movies to childhood memories. There was this easy rhythm to our chats, like we'd known each other longer than a few days. And when we finally met again, it wasn't at a noisy party, but at a quiet coffee shop. Sunlight filtering through the windows, the smell of fresh espresso wrapping around us. Jamie was just as relaxed as I'd hoped. Not the daring guy who stripped down in front of me, but the person I'd started to care about. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing effortlessly. At one point, Jamie reached across the table and took my hand. Lightly, almost shyly. My heart skipped, and I squeezed his fingers gently. "This is nice," I said. He smiled, eyes shining. "Yeah, it really is." From that day on, things moved quickly but naturally. We spent weekends exploring the city, sharing meals, and slowly peeling back layers we'd both kept hidden for too long. Jamie's confidence wasn't just about the way he looked. It was about trusting someone enough to be himself. And me? I realized that night, when he asked me to rate his body, wasn't just about judgment or games. It was about connection, honesty, and the courage to be seen. Sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most meaningful stories. And honestly, I can't wait to see where this one goes. After that coffee shop meetup, things between Jamie and me started to settle into this weirdly comfortable groove. It wasn't just the excitement of new attraction, it was something deeper, like finding someone who could actually get you without you having to explain every little thing. We began texting constantly. Mundane stuff mostly, but those little exchanges made my day better, you know? Like when I woke up to a message from him asking if I'd had breakfast, or when he'd randomly send me some goofy meme that made me laugh out loud in my office cubicle. It felt nice, normal even, and honestly kind of addictive. A couple of weekends after, Jamie invited me to this art gallery opening he was working on. I was pumped but nervous too. I wasn't exactly the gallery guy, but I wanted to be there for him. When I showed up, Jamie greeted me with that same easy smile, the one that made me forget all my worries. He looked good. He always did. But tonight there was this glow about him, like he was genuinely happy to have me there. The gallery was crowded. Walls splashed with vibrant colors and sharp lines that Jamie had spent weeks putting together. I wandered around, pretending to know what I was looking at, but really, I was just soaking in the way Jamie moved through the room, talking to people effortlessly. There was a confidence to him here that felt different from our quiet conversations, a professional, assured side. Eventually, he pulled me aside, away from the noise and chatter. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. I nodded. "Yeah. It's just cool seeing you in your element." He smiled, but there was something else there, a flicker of vulnerability. It's easier to be confident here than in a bar full of drunk strangers who might judge me for, well, everything. I reached out, touched his arm. "You don't have to worry about that with me." He looked at me for a long beat, then nodded. "Thanks." Later that night, after the gallery emptied and the crowd thinned, Jamie and I sat on a bench outside. The city lights flickered around us, and the air was just cool enough to make me glad he lent me his jacket. "Can I be honest?" Jamie said suddenly. "Always." I replied. He hesitated, then took a breath. "I'm scared sometimes. Not just about being judged, but about being hurt. I haven't had the easiest time with relationships, and sometimes I wonder if I'm just setting myself up to get burned again." My chest tightened. I knew that feeling too well. Yeah, me too, but I think it's worth it when it's with the right person. Jamie looked at me, his eyes searching. Do you think this could be that? I smiled. I don't know yet, but I want to find out. He reached out, took my hand in his, and this time held it without hesitation. The warmth of his skin against mine was grounding, and I felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. In the weeks that followed, we kept building on that connection. Our texts got longer, our talks deeper. We shared stories about our families, our fears, the little quirks that made us who we were. Jamie told me about his childhood in a small town, how he struggled to come out to his parents, how art was his escape. I told him about my own journey, the loneliness of moving to the city, the awkwardness of dating. One rainy evening, Jamie came over to my apartment. We cooked dinner together, fumbling over chopping boards and laughing when things went sideways. Afterwards, we settled on the couch, the rain tapping against the window like a gentle soundtrack. He looked over at me, eyes soft. I'm really glad we met that night. Me too, I said. I never thought a silly dare at a party would lead to this. Jamie smiled, then leaned in slowly. Our first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered in the same breath. It wasn't fireworks or movie scenes. It was real and quiet and perfect. That night, as we lay tangled together, I felt something shift inside me. The walls I'd built up around myself started to crack, letting in light I hadn't known I needed. Of course, it wasn't always easy. We had our moments of doubt, those little insecurities that creep in when you're not sure if the other person feels the same. But every time, we talked it out, learning how to be vulnerable in new ways. One afternoon, Jamie surprised me with a tiny sketchbook full of drawings, little portraits, snapshots of moments we'd shared, and even a drawing of that awkward party night when it all began. It was messy and imperfect, but it was his way of saying, I'm here. I looked up at him, heart full. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to find out with you. He grinned, brushing a hand over my cheek. Same here. Sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most meaningful chapters. And this one? It felt like just the start of something worth holding on to. Things between Jamie and me kept evolving in ways I hadn't quite expected. It wasn't just the fun dates or the easy conversations. It was the way we started to become part of each other's daily lives. Like, suddenly, I'd find myself thinking about him while I was stuck at work, or planning my weekends around when he was free. And honestly, that was new territory for me. One Friday night, a couple of months in, Jamie invited me over to his place. I was excited, but also a little nervous. I wanted to make a good impression on his place. Maybe cook something decent, or at least not burn the kitchen down. When I got there, he opened the door wearing that same casual, effortless smile, and somehow that made all my jitters melt away. Hey, he said, stepping aside so I could come in. His apartment was kind of a reflection of him. Art everywhere, books stacked in no particular order, a little messy, but warm. I looked around, taking it all in. Wow, you weren't kidding when you said you're creative. I joked. Jamie laughed, leading me to the small kitchen. Yeah, it's a bit of a chaos zone, but I like it. We decided to keep dinner simple. Pasta and whatever sauce we could throw together. And as we cooked, the conversation flowed like it always did. He told me about this new design project he was excited about, and I shared some annoying client stories from work. There was a comfortable rhythm to it, the kind where silence wasn't awkward but easy. After dinner, we moved to the couch, sprawled out with a couple of beers and a playlist Jamie had made, mostly indie stuff with a few throwback tracks thrown in. At some point, the music faded into the background, and Jamie looked over at me with that look that always made my stomach flip. You okay? He asked quietly. I nodded, but he wasn't convinced. You seemed distracted. I hesitated, then decided to be honest. It's just this whole thing with us. It's new for me, you know? I'm not used to feeling this way, or wanting someone like this. Jamie reached out, brushing a hand over mine. Hey, it's okay to feel that. I'm here. We're figuring it out together. That simple reassurance meant more than I could say. I squeezed his hand, feeling like maybe I could finally let my guard down a little more. Later, As the night deepened, Jamie leaned in and kissed me. This time, it wasn't tentative or shy. It was confident and warm, like he'd been waiting for this moment as much as I had. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling a rush of something that was equal parts excitement and comfort. Afterwards, we just lay there, tangled up on the couch, talking about everything and nothing until the early morning hours. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. A few weeks later, we hit a rough patch. It was nothing huge, just little things that built up. Missed texts, crossed signals, moments where insecurity crept in. I remember one evening when Jamie didn't reply to my messages for hours, and my mind spiraled into all sorts of worst-case scenarios. When I finally saw him in person, I confronted him. Feeling raw, "Why didn't you answer?" I was worried. He looked surprised, then sighed. "I'm sorry. I needed some space. Not because of you, but stuff with my family got complicated. I should have told you." That moment was a wake-up call. I realized how important communication was, how easy it was to misread silence as rejection. We talked it through, slowly untangling the tension, and by the end of the night, we were back where we belonged. Close, honest, and willing to work through the messiness. Those moments made me appreciate what we had even more. Love wasn't some perfect, flawless thing. It was messy and scary and beautiful all at once. One afternoon, Jamie surprised me with tickets to a small theater show, a favorite local indie band. We squeezed into the crowded venue, the music loud and the energy electric. Jamie grabbed my hand as the band played our song, and in that moment, surrounded by strangers but feeling completely connected, I realized how far we'd come from that awkward kitchen conversation at the party. On the way home, we stopped at a 24-hour diner, sitting in a booth with greasy plates and bad coffee, laughing about the night's chaos. Jamie looked at me and said, I never thought I'd find someone who gets me like you do." I smiled, feeling my heart swell. Me neither. And while the future was still unwritten, full of unknowns and challenges, I knew one thing for sure. With Jamie, I was ready to face it all. Months passed, and with each one, Jamie and I grew closer in ways I hadn't expected when he first dared me to rate his body at that party. It wasn't the flash or the thrill of that night that stuck with me. It was everything that came after, the quiet mornings, the honest talks, the imperfect but sweet moments that made us real. One Sunday afternoon, we found ourselves wandering through a small park tucked away from the city's noise. The sun was soft, the air just warm enough to forget winter was still a few weeks away. Jamie held my hand as we walked, fingers intertwined like it had become second nature. We didn't need to say much. The comfort was in simply being. We settled on a bench beneath a maple tree, leaves just beginning to turn. Jamie turned to me with that look he'd worn the first time we really connected. Open, a little vulnerable, and utterly sincere. He said, "I never thought I could feel this comfortable with someone, not just physically, but emotionally. You've made me want to be better, to stop hiding." I smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "Same here. You showed me what it means to be seen." We sat there for a while, watching a few kids chase after a stray dog, the city humming softly in the background. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic confession, just two people who'd found a quiet kind of love in the chaos. When Jamie leaned his head on my shoulder, I realized how much I'd come to rely on this. Not because it was easy all the time, but because it was real, messy, and worth it. As the light faded, I pulled him a little closer and whispered, "I don't know exactly what the future holds for us, but I'm grateful to be here now, with you." He looked up, eyes shining, and smiled. "Me too. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Love isn't about perfection or fireworks. It's about connection, trust, and the courage to be seen, even when it's scary. So yeah, that night at the party started with a silly dare, but it led me to something real, something worth holding on to. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.